Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Wednesday, April 24th, 2019. Time for another show. It's a Wednesday show. I love the Wednesday shows because Greg Dworkin and Joan McCarter come by and then I don't have to do anything. And it's great. Nothing's better than not having to do anything. Oh, well, I mean, other than participating in it. I do like to do this. It's, I don't make it seem like that first thing in the morning, but here I am every day nonetheless. I think I just like to complain. Maybe that's it. I don't know, and maybe that's why I have a radio show. Okay, well, Bill is awake with us all the way up there in Portland, Maine. Daily Coast Radio is live now. Kagro X, that's me, David Waldman, reminds guests, Joan McCarter, and Dem from Connecticut, our own Greg Dworkin, that if they don't show up on time, he's willing to ponder the issuance of, oh, deep breath, good, I need that, subpoenas. That felt good, okay. Or perhaps, Greg reminds him, a sternly worded letter, maybe censure. All of these things are on the table today as we watch the defiance grow from the White House. And may I remind you that, by the way, it was in the original contemplation of the framers that the defiance itself, whether or not there's actually underlying high crimes and misdemeanors, the defiance itself is impeachable. Yes. That's true. It is a blunt instrument. You have to be in an extreme situation to want to use it for such purposes. But routine inquiry into the operations of the government that is stonewalled by one branch against the legislative branch is, in fact, addressable by impeachment. It is absolutely within the contemplation of the founders. They meant it. They meant for Congress to have the power of oversight and for other branches to defy it. Well, it's a denial of the, it's a big separation of powers issue and a checks and balances issue, essentially. But this is the power that's given to them. There aren't other branches that have the power inherently, or rather not inherently, but explicitly spelled out in the Constitution to remove others from office. That's a prerogative that belongs to Congress, and, well, they can do it for pretty much anything they want, really, but they like to have reasons and to build a case before doing it, and that's a political calculation, of course, and it's a pretty good one, and it's also one that was within the contemplation of the founders. It's one they intended for people to go through, but, not everybody understands that in the same way. And of course, you can make things up as you go along. That is an option for you. The president is doing that this morning. He's on a real tear with respect to, he's on a Twitter tear, is the best way of explaining it. He's angrily tweeting that, his dad is going to beat up your dad, essentially, is what's going on here. He tweets this morning, for instance, so let's see if we can't pull this thing up with a slow responding computer today. Let's get to his Twitter stream, I guess. And some people might disagree with even giving him the time of day this way, but just so you know what he's up to. He's been anger tweeting most mornings, which is usually a pretty good indication of his mental state, such as it is. And let's see, this morning, well, for one thing, he's bringing up former CIA analyst Larry Johnson, who's not really in good standing with the reality-based community, accusing the United Kingdom and their intelligence operations of helping the Obama administration spy on the presidential campaign, the Trump presidential campaign in 2016. Trump thinks everybody's spying on his campaign. Of course, they're not, but that's what he likes to think. Now, it was also announced this morning that he'll be making a state visit to the UK, I think in July. This is his second attempt at getting a ride in the Queen's Golden Carriage. Still uncertain as to whether or not that's going to happen. Buckingham Palace having announced that Trump will not be staying in residence at Buckingham Palace during his visit there. Apparently, massive renovations Massive renovations get in the way of his staying there. The logistics, they just don't work out. So I'm not certain where he's staying. I don't think there's a Trump property in London, but I suppose he can helicopter to and from his golf course in Scotland if he really wants to. I don't know where they're going to put him up. I'm sure it's someplace lovely and luxurious, but not as beautiful as I would have made it. That's entirely possible. Of course, let's see, the last time Trump had complaints about a European landmark building that was undergoing massive renovations, it burned down. So we'll see whether that happens at Buckingham Palace. So we got to get him back for burning the White House in the War of 1800 millions, whatever the number was that we had. I don't remember when the War of 1812 happened, but it happened and it was very, very bad. That's not the rest of his, the balance of his anger tweeting, though. He went on, of course, to wave away the Mueller report. First, though, by way of screaming about immigration, letting us know that another caravan is apparently underway. I don't know whether that's actually true or not, but he has that to say. And demands that Mexico arrest them all, but if they don't, we're going to have to call up the military and something. I assume he's going to start threatening to shoot everybody. He's already accused Mexico of pulling guns on our National Guard soldiers. I don't know whether there's any grain of truth somewhere in the middle of that or not. I haven't heard about it, but not the sort of thing that would reach my ears necessarily. Wants an armed clash with Mexico if we can fit it in next week, so keep an eye open for that. By the way, if you're going to have an armed clash with Mexico, a wall will get in the way, I think, and unless we're just going to throw things at one another over. And also, remember, the wall's supposed to be transparent. It's going to be very annoying to be able to see Mexican soldiers but not be able to beat them up, I guess. Then he moved on to the Mueller report, which he described as, of course, being written by angry Democrats and Trump haters. So his latest line is, it didn't lay a glove on me. And we wouldn't know if we were talking about his gloves. That we need a microscope, electron microscope, to see whether any of his gloves touched him. I did nothing wrong, all caps there. And then this is the most intriguing thing. If the partisan Dems ever tried to impeach, I would first head to the U.S. Supreme Court. Not only are there no high crimes and misdemeanors, there are no crimes by me at all. All of the crimes were committed by a crooked Hillary, the Dems, the DNC, and dirty cops. And we caught them in the act, but we haven't showed you any evidence of it because we don't have any. But we waited for Mueller and we won. So now the Dems look to Congress as the last hope. Of course, I love the idea of his, I'm going to head to the U.S. Supreme Court. Like a childhood dream, a child's understanding of what happens and all this. If they impeach me, I'll sue, which is his answer to everything. And he can file suits. It's just, you can't just say, hello, Supreme Court, I want to come over. I'm going to sue somebody. Make room on your schedule. It doesn't really go like that. Although, who knows, I guess. Suppose he files and just hands it to the Supreme Court. I don't know what the Supreme Court is going to do with it. Maybe a child's understanding of it works at a certain level. And nobody knows what to do with this idiot president who shows up and knocking on the door of the Supreme Court. Let me in. I want to sue somebody. And they turn him away. Buckingham Palace wouldn't turn him away. The Supreme Court will do no more, I'm sure. Anyway, we'll watch how this develops and welcome Greg Dworkin in for the day with his raft of stories. Hi, Greg. How are you?
Hi. Well, you have to remember
do.
That Trump gets most of his news either from Fox News or from Twitter.
Or Golden Books. They were a fantastic source.
Yeah, but if he gets his news from Twitter, he still probably thinks that the marshal of the Supreme Court is the legal governing authority for this country.
Right. Thurgood Marshall. I've heard about him.
So you could always appeal.
Don't tell me I'm wrong. Yes,
right?
that's
true. If
the
marshal says this, that's
appealing.
like everything, you know?
Mm-hmm. I think, who knows where he's getting his information from? He's Larry Johnson, for one thing. I thought he didn't realize he was alive.
The other person he's getting information from is Lou Dobbs, which is rather disturbing. Yes. But we'll get that for
Human tiki torch
in a moment. The other thing that Trump may be thinking of, perhaps, is airdropping water over Buckingham Palace.
Oh, that's a good idea, actually.
It worked in France. Why shouldn't it work in England?
Fire suppression. It's a great idea. If you're having major renovations,
you do a pre-fire.
Anywhere. Yeah, that's right. So I don't drench it.
Drench it and then renovate it and put my name on it.
Yes.
We'll call it Trump Palace.
Oh, they had one of those.
Yeah, but it didn't work. So let's build another one.
Yes. casino-wise. There's no reason why there couldn't be a casino in Buckingham Palace. They're legal.
Right. So, it's still the case.
There might be one.
That, impeachment is more and more and more on the table. An interesting word from Jug Legume, who's following this on Twitter and now has his own newsletter. Yes. And he has a really interesting train of thought here. He says, I guess you're not supposed to say this in polite company. But Democrats' reticence to impeach Trump is not based on the need for more investigation or commitment to bipartisanship. It's based on polling and highly paid political consultants.
Oh.
Here's how it works. Polling has support for impeachment at about 33%. And in some cases, it's closer to 40. Protections for pre-existing conditions is at 75. So consultants say, stop talking about impeachment, talk about pre-existing conditions.
Or maybe we've already done our job there, but okay.
They are paid millions for this insight. But remember, these are the same kind of consultants who insisted Trump had no chance of winning because his poll numbers were so bad.
Oh, and, they're pollsters, so.
Well, how did they screw up so badly? In modern politics, the binary question of support oppose doesn't mean very much.
Oh.
Political success involves not just ticking through popular positions, it's about controlling the narrative. Mueller will be a major topic in 2020. Will Democrats cede the narrative to Trump or control the narrative? That's the real political question. So, his point there is, if you want to know how ignoring Trump shenanigans and focusing on the issues works out, ask Jeb. Yeah. Ask Marco, ask Ted. Ask all the Republicans who ran against them. Anyway, Judd says, I feel pretty strongly about this, and you might not agree, but if you find this kind of thing interesting, read his newsletter. Well, or read his Twitter feed, because he generally puts his newsletter on his Twitter feed, and that way you can read it without subscribing, which is what I do.
Yeah, I think you're supposed to subscribe to make him feel good, so maybe you want to do that too, but then I would read it on Twitter. That's where you can talk to him about it. You can't do that in the newsletter. Right.
Now, here's another train of thought, which is, I think, highly relevant for a lot of the stuff that Trump does.
Okay. What does he do?
Interest because Andrew Lawrence tweeted a reference to a Lou Dobbs show.
Okay.
Right. Andrew Lawrence works at Rapid Response, MMFA, Media Matters.
I hope someone's paying for this.
Lou Dobbs, well, you have to pay somebody to watch Lou Dobbs.
I mean, I wouldn't ask this guy to do it himself.
Democrats, quote, are attempting to replace us.
I've heard that somewhere.
By supporting immigration. You remember that great Charlottesville chant, you will not replace us.
Yes.
Jews will not replace us.
That's another good one. Russia is our friend was another.
Immigrants will not replace us.
Yeah. What else?
Okay, so what's that all about? Well, Noah Smith.
These guys are real worried about platooning. Okay.
Noah Smith had a really interesting observation tweet storm about this the other day. No Opinion is where you could find him. That's very clever. Much anti-immigration sentiment is motivated by racism, but we should not neglect the impact of partisan politics. Republicans fear that immigration equal importing votes for the Democrats.
Yes,
so when he talked about replacing us, they're not just talking about they're going to come take our jobs. He's also saying they're going to come outvote us. Note that this was a big reason for anti-immigrant sentiment, No Opinion writes, in the 1800s. Federalists and Whigs, we know all about Whigs. We learned about them on Monday.
Right.
Feared that immigration equal importing votes for the Democrats, the older party. But immigration restriction has never succeeded in the early 1800s. Why? Because immigrants got naturalized, registered to vote, and guess what? Wait for it. Voted for Democrats.
So they were right.
They were right. This strategy also basically worked in California in the 1990s. In a broader sense, you could say they're right because if you let everybody vote, they're going to get voted out. That's why they restrict. That's why they have this voter ID stuff. That's why they have all of these voting shenanigans.
These polls that say they're only 25%. There's right.
When the GOP went nativist, immigrants and children of immigrants mobilized politically and gave the GOP the boot. But note, all of these were state-level victories, not national.
All right.
In the 1800s, immigration restriction was left to the states, and California victory after the 90s was also state. At the national level, mobilizing immigrant votes en masse is harder. In addition to harnessing 1800s-style partisan fear of imported votes, Trump is also harnessing 1920s-style racism. And racism, unlike political nativism, has a track record of success.
Yes.
In Trump, America faces the simultaneous resurrection of two nativist impulses. The partisan nativism that failed to keep out Irish and German immigrants in the 1800s, and the racist nativism that succeeded in keeping out Italian, East European, and Asian immigration in the 1920s.
Okay.
Registering and mobilizing Hispanic and Asian voters en masse, and by the way, Asian voters I think are going to be 11% of the voting population come 2020, something like that. I saw that statistic floating around. Don't ask me to quote it. And that'll be an important part of defeating Trumpism, just as registering and mobilizing Irish votes helped in the 1800s. But to really defeat Trumpism, you need to defeat nativist racism on the ideological battlefield, which, by the way, helps when the person who is for fairness in immigration wins. So far, it looks like we've been doing that. Trump's racist nativism has provoked a pro-immigration backlash, and he presents numbers in his tweet storm to show that support for immigration is at its highest level. And he's talking strictly about legal immigration here. No confusion. The Trump administration is attempting to restrict legal immigration, in addition to the stuff that they're pulling on the border with pretending to shoot at people and then or pretending people are shot at them so they have a pretext for World War III, as Rick Wilson puts it. At this point, the best hope of Stephen Miller and the other nativists is that nativism can continue to fire up Trump's base while other issues more favorable to Republicans, judges, distract the electorate long enough for Trump to win a second term. And that might happen. So pro-immigration folks should focus on the long game, register and mobilize Hispanic and Asian American voters, craft a durable, permanent, popular ideology of opposition and nativist racism, and make sure it outlives the Trump era. So that's the background behind Stephen Miller's strategy. And, it's important to, everybody is quick to point out correctly that a lot of the economic anxiety is, in fact, racism.
Yes.
But a lot of that support is also, I don't want those people voting.
Yes. There's a lot going on about people that they don't want voting these days.
Yes. And so, of course, you don't want Democrats voting. You don't want kids voting. You don't want college students voting. You don't want black people voting. You don't want legal immigrants who become citizens voting.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
you don't want ex-felons voting. You go down the list.
I don't want anybody. Just me.
I want Republican landowners to vote.
I don't.
That's where all of that comes from. And it's all wrapped up in what they're trying to do. It's just, it's odd that now there's a propaganda outlet, Fox News, which supports and reinforces this stuff, especially for the over 65s. But at the same time, it's pretty, revealing to actually see it stated so bluntly.
Yes.
With a lot of their voters, you have to state things bluntly. They don't get nuance.
Right. Yeah, okay. Well, thanks for saying it up front, folks.
Yeah,
I don't know. I don't really. I think we knew.
Everybody knows where you're coming from, which is, I think kind of important.
I guess
but,
so.
It's, okay, fine. What are you going to do about it? Well, the thing to do about it is multiple fronts. I think Judd is right. I think there's no reason to take impeachment off the table. I think censure could lead to impeachment. I think hearings can lead to impeachment. And who are the interesting people who said, no, this is ridiculous, now saying, actually, it's not ridiculous? Well, you have Lawrence Tribe. Okay, fine. He's a liberal jurisprudence type, subject matter expert, who told us not to do it and then just had an editorial that said, you know what, maybe it's a good idea.
Oh.
I changed my mind.
Okay. That's good.
Right? And that's not a bad thing. And
no,
that's kind of
not
expected.
This time.
I mean, I don't know if that's like super duper breaking news that he would think that. But he's got a piece in the USA Today, which I'll give you, which he outlines exactly what his thinking was.
For the USA.
I warned that impeachment talk is dangerous, he says, but the time has come. Congress has a duty to provide a beacon of principle and democratic values to the American people. It must pick up the baton that Mueller has offered and come to a judgment of its own with the understanding the conduct that falls short of criminal conspiracy may nonetheless be impeachable.
Sure.
Consider, for example, candidate Trump's public call for the help of the Russian state in defeating Hillary Clinton met within hours The special counsel charged by Russian attempts to hack domains used by our campaign and personal office read together with Mueller's report. The incident exposes the welcome that Trump and his circle extended to foreign support in manipulating the U.S. electorate. The behavior, whether called collusion or something else, is exactly the kind of conduct framers had in mind when they created procedures for impeachment. The report is unequivocal in concluding that even if Trump is criminally innocent of obstruction, it's not for lack of trying. The main reason the investigation wasn't completely thwarted was not that the president didn't endeavor to thwart it. That's the definition of criminal obstruction. But rather that Trump's subordinates refused to comply. And also he's incompetent,
Yes.
So he certainly tried, he certainly wanted to, and Mueller might even have indicted him anyway, but for this idea that you don't indict a sitting president. So that was Larry Tribe. But perhaps even more interesting, because you didn't expect it, is a fellow named J.W. Verrett.
I didn't expect it. Who is that?
Yeah, exactly right. That's what I'm saying. So J.W. Verrett is a Republican conservative lawyer, professor of law at George Mason University.
Oh, not when I was there, but okay.
Antonin Scalia Law School, it's now called.
Yes, right.
Is that your fault?
Yeah, Tiki Torch University. Okay.
And here's the headline. The Mueller report was my tipping point. I was a Trump transition staffer, and I've seen enough. It's time for impeachment.
Okay.
Right? Let's start at the end of the story, he says. This weekend, I
He's
read
impeached.
Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report twice. I wonder if he started at the end of the story by reading it backwards. That would be fun. This weekend, I read
end.
Special Counsel Robert Mueller's report twice and realized that enough was enough. I needed to do something. I've worked on every Republican presidential transition team for the past 10 years and recently served as counsel to the Republican-led House Financial Services Committee. My permanent job is as a law professor at the George Mason University Antonin Scalia Law School, there's a mouthful, which is not political, but where my colleagues have held many prime spots in Republican administrations. If you think calling for the impeachment of a sitting Republican president would constitute career suicide for someone like me, you may end up being right.
Okay,
But I did
we'll
exactly
see.
that this weekend, tweeting it's time to begin impeachment proceedings. Let's go back to the beginning. He's a good Republican. He worked for Mitt Romney, yada, yada, yada. In time, my work for the transition became awkward. I disagreed with Trump's rhetoric on immigration and trade. We just talked about that, immigration at least. I also had strong concerns about his policies in the area of financial regulation. That's his expertise. The hostility to Russian sanctions from the policy team, particularly from members picked by Manafort, was even more unsettling. I wasn't good at hiding my distaste. We parted ways in October. I wasn't the right fit. I never considered joining the Never Trump Republican efforts. Their criticisms of President Trump's lack of character and unfitness for office were spot on, of course, but they didn't seem very pragmatic. That is to say, how can I have power and still do that? There was no avoiding the fact that he'd won, and like many others, I felt the focus should be on guiding his policy decisions in a constructive direction. So he was a big admirer of Don McGahn. Read the Mueller report, he read McGahn, and he said, okay, that's it. He has to go. That's the short story.
Okay.
Now, Republicans who stand up to Trump today may face some friendly fire. Today's Republican electorate seems spellbound by the sound bites of Twitter and cable news, for which Trump is a born wizard. Yet, in time, we can help rebuild the Republican Party, enabling it to rise from the ashes of the post-Trump apocalypse into a party with renewed commitment, yada, yada, yada. Still wants to be conservative, just not with Trump.
Yeah.
So
okay.
You think it's a trickle, and it is. But trickles often start something. Here's one from CNN this morning at 8 o'clock. Iowa's longest-serving GOP lawmaker joins the Democrats because of Trump.
Oh, well.
I mean, the idea that, oh, well, they will never change. They're a monolith. We talked about this. That's true for about 80% of them, but there's still 20% that are in play. And the more people start to speak out, whether it's William Weld, who's running against Trump, Larry Hogan, who might. Weld said that Trump should just flat out resign. That's easier than beating him in a primary.
Well, sure,
but,
I say it too.
Yeah, I say it too. But people are starting to speak out on this. So, it's interesting, and we'll see where that goes. And that's, I think, one of the reasons why Trump is losing it on Twitter and starting yelling and screaming and raving and drooling and foaming at the mouth.
Awesome.
And should be checked for rabies, except we don't have anybody except for the Marshal of Supreme Court in legal authoritative position, legal controlling authority, to actually check him, because he hires people who are going to lie, because everybody in the White House lies. Which, by the way, Mueller showed pretty clearly, especially Sarah Huckabee Sanders. I mean, it's all outlined.
Okay.
Liar.
Yes. Oh, wait, and I have that tomorrow. It's buried under about 15 other app windows. There it is.
There you go. That's how Sarah Huckabee Sanders should be treated every time she gives a press conference once a year.
Sure. Well, yeah, and so it's not even that demanding. You just do it once a year.
You can bring in Carole King and have her do it.
Okay, right. Someone would hire her as a reporter just for a day.
Just to do that.
I'll call on you. Oh no, I can't believe I did it again.
Liar!
It's the second year in a row I've called on. She comes dressed as a. Yeah. All right, whatever.
The costume should have given it away, but you know.
Honestly, think, Sarah.
The fact that she's sitting next to Billy
leave
Crystal
at some
is also a given.
Yes. But wasn't Sarah Sanders supposed to be on her way out at some point?
No, Trump likes liars.
Yeah, I mean, he wasn't firing her, but I thought she was floating the idea of, one of those people who was, I'm going to leave.
But get back to Judd Lickham's basic point, is controlling the narratives. Got nothing to do with the numbers. All right, Nixon's impeachment numbers were 19% before the televised hearings. And then it reached more than a majority, and Nixon had to step down. I'm not saying that this is the exact parallel, but the point is public opinion will change based on what narrative we're talking about. If you let Trump say, I was completely exonerated and they're just picking on me in his various and sundry forms, that's his narrative.
Yes.
The fact is that you've done something serious, and a serious inquiry into what's going on, otherwise known as impeachment hearings, is occurring, is another narrative, and I'd rather have the latter than the former. Okay.
Well, we need to do the work in order to have the, ladder? Ladder. In order to get that, it has to be discussed. Even discussing that we should or shouldn't be discussing it is a discussion about impeachment. So I guess
it makes him upset, so he tweets about it. Saying, you're hitting a nerve there.
He's the one doing the most talking about it. We'll be back to talk more about it in 2 minutes. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Edwards Radio. Greg Dworkin's still with us, and we're still talking about impeachment in defiance of orders from the President of the United States, who talks about impeachment every week. Right, yes. And the fire marshal at the Supreme Court, who won't let anybody in. That's
Marshals.
The discount store. Oh, an excellent place to be. They should sponsor the show. I'll have to call them up. Maybe the fire marshal of the Supreme Court is the reason why Trump will eventually claim that you can't have more than 9 justices. He'll be all right. You can't fit him in there. The fire marshal of the Supreme Court, even though there are thousands of my fans waiting. This room is only allowed to have 9
people. You should leave. I love those signs. It makes everybody act exactly the way they're supposed to.
Perfect.
Or the ones in elevators. This elevator is certified to hold 2,000 pounds. Lose weight.
When my last visit to Iceland, I heard something about that. We got in an elevator somewhere, and I think some English tourists were reading the elevator certificate and saying, reading it in kilos, of course, but their joke was, it's up to 2,000 kilos, and they said, or 4 Americans, which I thought was rude, but largely true.
Yeah, largely true.
Okay.
So Brian Boyler tweets, Democrats who are scared of doing a partisan impeachment should remind themselves that Republicans publicly articulated a strategy 10 years ago of unifying against everything Democrats want to do to make it seem partisan and hope Democrats fracture. They are united in order to divide you, and you are giving life force to the tool they will use to destroy liberal society. At least make them take the vote on it.
Okay.
Take it head on.
Yes. I will.
Trump is basically saying, I'm not going to respond to anything Congress does.
Yeah, right.
and I'm going to try to put Hillary in jail. And what are you going to do about it? Go ahead, impeach me.
Right.
I dare you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
He has. He has dared us this
Thanks
morning.
for the offer. I think we will.
Okay, I'm for that.
But you
yeah,
know, that's strategy. The strategy is to strongly consider impeachment and not take it off the table.
Okay.
And the tactics are, I'm not saying right now I've already made up my mind about impeachment. You can't do that without hearings. So I'm good with censure, especially if it leads to important hearings. We don't need to have the hearings before censure because Mueller did that job for us. But in other cases like emoluments, then you should have the hearings first and then censure. And if all the censuring and others turn out to be the exact articles of impeachment, well, that's cool.
Yeah, and you would want to have hearings, but that Mueller didn't address it. Astonishingly enough, he's not supposed to. And
that wasn't his charge.
Yeah, right. And
as they say it is.
We don't want a. They always say they don't want a rogue prosecutor on these things. You do. But
cops, I think, is the form of art that Donald Trump used this morning.
Right. Okay. Although everybody did get upset with Ken Starr when he handled things that way. But then again, remember, he was an independent counsel, and that's totally different.
Than a special counsel.
Right.
Right, exactly.
So, although, I mean, it would be interesting to see a special counsel say...
counsel law. I mean, that's really the only way you can go here.
Yeah. That's the next stage.
A popular counsel.
Fire me
People's
if you don't
counsel.
like it. Mm-hmm. Well, there are proposals out there. I'll get to that sometime. Maybe I'll discuss that with Armando one of these days. He asked about whether there was any movement at any point to legislate a solution to the contempt of Congress problem that we face.
Wherein Congress can't really enforce their subpoenas through the marshal of the Supreme Court. Is that the idea?
Mm-hmm. But to find some way of giving them more power to do so that seems legitimate. And there have been proposals made. And, of course, when the controversies died, so did the proposed solutions, and everybody forgot about them. And now we need them again. Darn it. Should have taken care of that. All right. Well, what else is news these days?
Well,
Anything
let's
else
see.
he's yelling about?
What do we have? We got a lot of stuff. You know, Joe Biden, we can talk about the state of the current Democratic electorate and primary group, bunch,
I see. Okay.
gang, whatever you want to call them. Here's a really fascinating poll from Monmouth that Noah Rudnick, who's a data guy, posted the other day. And it's about Democrats' feelings about who should be running.
Nice people.
Right? And there we go. Skype is being weird. There we go. And it says, would it be better for the Democrats to nominate a person of color or nominate a white candidate to run against Trump, or doesn't this matter?
Okay. Dangerous, right? Noah.
Nominate a person of color, 5%. Nominate a white candidate, 6%. Doesn't matter, 87%.
Okay, that's nice. I'm glad it came out that way.
Would it be better for the Democrats to nominate a woman or nominate a man to run against Trump, or doesn't this matter? Nominate a woman, 7%. Nominate a man, 12%. Doesn't matter, 77%.
Okay, lovely.
So the vast majority of Democratic voters haven't picked based on identity politics who they want, despite the claims of Republicans. Identity politics, as they define it, isn't driving or dominating the choices here.
Yes.
Everybody's got an equal chance.
Okay. Well.
All right. So Joe Biden doesn't get in the race today. He gets in the race tomorrow.
Why?
I don't know why. I don't know why he delayed it.
No one knows why, right?
And I don't know why he's running, but you know.
Oh, that too.
No one knows why.
Well,
but,
he's not.
I can't answer either one of those.
Right. That's maybe that's why he's delaying the entry. When people say, "Well, I don't know why you're running," you can just say, "I'm not. Why are you asking?"
Right. So their subheader here is Democratic 2020 diversity not a priority. Biden stable, Bernie sags, Buttigieg surges. Those are their numbers.
Yes.
Okay. Among a field of 24 announced and potential contenders, Biden has 27%, similar to his 28% support in March. That's why they said he's stable. They weren't talking about his mental capacity. They were talking about his numbers. And 29% in January. So he's basically running the same as he has. Bernie went down from 25 in March to 20 now. So if Biden enters the race, they say he starts off with a fairly stable amount of goodwill from Democrats, which is true. Where that goes is a different story altogether. This is Patrick Murray, Pollster Patrick on Twitter if you want to follow him.
Oh, okay.
And South Bend, Indiana Mayor Pete Buttigieg currently is 8%. That's up from 1%, less than 1% in the last one. That's a surge. Everybody else is lower.
Yeah, that counts as a surge, sure.
Yeah, so basically, that doesn't necessarily mean that Mayor Pete winds up getting the nomination. It doesn't mean Biden does. It doesn't mean Bernie doesn't. But it's an interesting state of the race for right now. And Patrick is a pretty good pollster. So okay. I think Monmouth is a very solid national poll in that regard.
I think it'll work, and it's good for Malta what Buttigieg is doing. That's nice.
Also Norwegian.
Yes, right.
There's been more talk of speaking Norwegian than any time in my recent memory.
Yes, that has been very impressive. I enjoy seeing somebody with language skills. I don't know that it makes my decision for me, but it's nice to show other countries that there are some people who pay attention to language studies. It was fun to see him respond in French, which was, I think, very well received to the Notre Dame fire. To be able to do it. There are other candidates in the past who have been able to do things similarly. It doesn't necessarily mean you win. I think John Kerry could have done that job.
Well, I'll just remind you, the ex-Meet the Press guy, David Gregory, speaks fluent French. It didn't do it for me.
No? Okay. Well, he also thinks
he got W all upset because he wasn't speaking English. But at the same time, it didn't impress me with David Gregory being a good political analyst. So, the two things are separate.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's nice. That you look intelligent. Should you be president? I'll get back to you on that.
Right. So there's a nice piece here by Ed Gilgore that I can only quote to you from memory because I've hit my monthly article limit. And going back and reading the same article apparently is not allowed.
That's weird. They should let you see the same one.
Let's just comment. Biden's shock and awe strategy for 2020 race smells like Jebs in 2016.
It smells like
you have to have a reason for running. You can't just raise a lot of money and say, see, I'm electable. The electability thing, if I'm doing this correctly from memory, sorry, Ed, is, look, electability can fade in a moment with one bad poll.
Yeah.
All of a sudden your bubbles burst and the emperor's wearing no clothes.
I guess so. Smells like is kind of a disturbing analogy,
well,
but okay.
That is the official headline, so you could read it, but I can't read it.
I'm not going to waste a click on that. Are you kidding?
Yeah, well, I'm just saying. You can read his tweets.
Okay, well, I'll do that. They smell.
Yeah, Paul Waldman says, pretty persuasive from Ed Kilgore on why Biden 20 smells a lot like Jeb 16.
He goes with the smell.
Maybe they use the same cologne. I don't know.
This is collusion. Collusion.
Cologne, right.
Yeah. Is what's happening. All right, well, I won't bother with that because I go through New York Magazine articles pretty quickly. Remind me not to click on that.
Right. And this is something that I know will annoy Armando because it annoys me and it annoys all of us.
Oh.
During arguments today, this is yesterday, the U.S. Supreme Court's conservative majority seemed willing to let the Trump administration add the question about citizenship to the 2020 census form.
Yes. Bad news.
The Supreme Court of the United States is a political body just as political as the White House or the Congress, and Democrats have not paid enough attention to this. This is the part that annoys Armando. He's not saying I'm wrong. It's annoying him because he's saying I'm right. And so you have this partisan group that nobody pays attention to, and as a result, you don't it's like ignoring the census in the odd years, right? This is something that ought to galvanize you to go out and vote because this is the year that's going to decide census stuff. Do people do that? No.
They don't. We remind them every time, but...
And they don't. And so the Supreme Court is like the most important thing. Mm-hmm. Do people vote on that? No. Well, Republicans do. Conservatives do. Well, we don't. And that's part of the reason why we're in this predicament now.
We have a hard time in this country getting everybody to agree about what they're voting on. And that's because, one, there's a lot of us, and two, we don't have referenda, generally speaking, on the national level, and three, another reason, I guess, is our presidential campaigns last 14 years, And so it's pretty difficult to have that be all about one thing. But I only bring that up to remind everybody of the absurdity of the position against impeachment, which rests on let the voters decide, because there's too much going on. You're never going to get a clean decision. It's a dumb idea to say.
And citizens are guided by what they see their quote leaders end quote do, and that absolutely is scare quotes.
Yes, right, and it just doesn't work like that. Especially, I mean,
but Judd Legome is right. It's setting the narrative, and if the narrative is Trump has done bad enough things so that a serious impeachment inquiry happens, that's important. Another thing to emphasize, by the way, talking about media, is that subpoenas from the Judiciary Committee or Oversight Committee or Intelligence Committee are congressional subpoenas.
Yes.
They are not Democratic subpoenas.
Right. It falls to Democrats to issue them because Republicans abdicate their responsibility to the committee.
Well, it's also the responsibility of the majority. It's one of the things you do when you're in the majority.
Right. And, for better or for worse, like it or not,
obligation.
The majority in Congress, in the House, is made up of Democrats.
At the moment.
That's the way it is. But they get to wield that power for having won it. Now the things they do are congressional.
This is a tweet from Evan Siegfried, my Republican friend, who back in the day used to work for Republican mayors in New York City. That's where he cut his teeth in politics. He said, but he's a millennial, and one of his big interests is following millennials. And trying to convince millennials not to abandon the GOP. He's having a tough time right now. Voter turnout, Michael Del Moro points out, voter turnout in the 2018 midterms hit a 100-year high and jumped from 20% to 36% among citizens aged 18 to 29 compared to 2014. So compared to the last midterm, the largest percentage point increase among any group. That's from the census. Okay, so the young people turned out. All those people said, young people don't vote. They voted. In fact, their increase was higher than any other group. Young voters were D plus 11 in 2014, and they went D plus 35 in 2018. Women went from D plus 4 in 2014 to D plus 19. And even seniors shifted from R plus 16 in 2014 to R plus 2 in 2018. Again, that's the group that Trump is targeting on Facebook with a few ads.
Everything. Thousands of ads.
Like the Russians did, according to Jeremy.
How do millennials respond on the question of impeachment? Are we asking that?
Don't know yet. But that's the kind of narrative questions that one needs to ask after you decide that that's what you're doing. It's only a theoretical now. It's a hypothetical, as they like to say in law school. But, until you actually have that discussion, you really can't ask the question properly. Other people who have come around to, it's time to impeach include liberal columnist Charles Blow, Eugene Robinson. It's getting out there. And for all of the effort to tamp down the discussion's happening anyway because there are conservatives and Republicans, as I pointed out at the beginning of my segment last time, that are driving this narrative. And narrative is going to overwhelm the polls. So just keep that in mind. So that's my segment for today.
Excellent.
This is Greg Dworkin speaking with my good friend David Waldman. Kagro in the morning. I'll be back tomorrow. Is Joan on today?
That is excellent. Yes.
Say hi.
So I will. I'll do so in an excellent manner, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Before you go, I just saw Igor Bobich tweeting, Nadler even mentioned jailing administration officials as a consequence for contempt of Congress in a Bloomberg piece he's quoting here. So I'll have to dive into that one. And I guess I'll just say, now that everybody is allowing the I word into their conversation.
As they should.
Yes, I feel very good about it. I feel like, I think Trump would have made it an inevitability anyway that it would enter into the conversation. But I feel like we did a lot of good work, both with inherent contempt ideas and impeachment and normalizing the idea of having to discuss it from time to time with out-of-control presidents that went on during the George W. Bush administration, too, has at least armed people with tools to discuss impeachment and It's gratifying to see, even if people don't remember where they found out about it the first
Hey,
time.
you want to hear something funny?
Yes.
Okay, Megan McArdle, one of the worst columnists at the Washington Post.
All right. Funny
Right.
so far.
Well, I mean, that's not fair. They have some really, really bad ones like Mark Thiessen. But Megan McArdle is usually wrong, but does so in a David Brooks, Brett Stevens kind of way. New York Times columnist, so I guess she's her equivalent there. Megan McArdle, columnist at the Washington Post, opinions my own, she says, tweets as asymmetric info, and says, as we head into Medicare for all season, I would just like to set the stage by reiterating my view that the Overton window is commonly used in activist discourse as a hot, steaming pile of garbage.
Oh. Okay.
All right, that's her opening gambit.
Great.
May I just point out that this whole discussion about impeachment and that now it's okay to talk about it, even if we haven't decided what to do about it, is a perfect example of the Overton window working.
Yes.
That's the reason why you have to talk about impeachment, even if you haven't decided what to do. It's mainstream. Now people have to respond to it. You have conservatives who are saying, impeachment's not such a bad idea. You have people like Larry Tribe changing their mind in public. It's discussed on cable TV. That's what Overton window in real life actually looks like. And just at the time that you're seeing a terrific example of it, she wants to reiterate that she thinks it's a hot, steaming pile of garbage.
Well, I will tell you what having Megan McArdle call it a hot, steaming pile of garbage does to the Overton window on Overton window discussions.
Yeah, I would think so. She says, yeah, there is one, but, all the things that are going to happen were going to happen anyway.
That's entirely possible, but I guess...
So stop using Overton window. I hate the term. I mean, I'm a little sympathetic there. I think it's a little bit overused, too, but the idea that it doesn't exist is kind of dumb.
It is. And, of course, it was an inevitability, then Megan didn't need to tweet about this. So thanks, Megan. All right, well, there's a lot of hot, steaming piles of garbage around, and I don't object
and
to
some of them
meeting
get
one
paid
with
to
another.
write,
Right.
But not me. I do it for free.
Fight fire with fire and hot, steaming piles of garbage with what?
With airdrops of
More
water.
fire. Yes, and water. Right.
Both. That's what you're supposed to do. When you have a hot, steaming pile of garbage, you're supposed to airdrop water on it because it always works and it looks good on TV.
Yeah, or, I was wondering, maybe the garbage was on fire. Once you've dumped water on it, it's a hot, steaming pile of garbage.
Only if the fire goes out.
Right.
Depends what's causing the fire. Sometimes that just makes it worse.
Oh,
all right,
true.
take care. Say hi to Joan, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
Very good. Okay, thanks very
I'm sure
much.
stuff will happen.
I'm not so sure, but we'll see. I'll see if I can make something happen.
All right.
In
Now that
between
you've
then and now.
moved the Overton window in that direction, I'm sure something will.
That's right.
Take care.
Okay, thanks. You do the same. And time to hit pocket here. Oh, I found the Megan McArdle tweet, so I've got that for all the rest of you. Let's see. Oh, I should catch up on this comment. I should put ketchup on this comment for some reason. Bill was wanted to remind us we ought to remind everybody else when we read through Trump's rage tweets in the morning that, yes, remember, Trump's tweets are all official White House statements. And if you have difficulty remembering that, there is an account out there somewhere that reformats all of his tweets as what appear to be mock-ups of press releases from the White House, just to remind you of that point. And it is a very good one. All right. Let's see. Many things to follow up with today, including, all of the discussion about not only impeachment, but about contempt of Congress. I have been interested to watch everybody discuss it both over at Daily Kos and in the wider media circles. And, of course, I enjoy watching it develop this way, although very often it is kind of funny the way we reinvent the wheel every once in a while, even in our little Daily Kososphere, where I guess maybe if the search function was perhaps more robust, I wonder if more people would find it. But I'm reminded every time I watch people reissue takes on inherent impeachment that we have discussed it several times in the past on Daily Kos, but I don't know how many people. It's not all that easy to call up stories from 2005, 6, 7, 8, and 9, all the way through. it's not always all that easy to find. And then, of course, who wants to read old, dumb stuff when I could just talk about brand new, fun, interesting stuff with current articles? And there's no doubting that that is usually more attractive to readers, something based on a current article that they may have read as well. But the base of knowledge is out there, and I'm glad to have helped it take root. And I don't know. I'm glad to see people discussing this happening as a possibility and being knowledgeable about it. Let's see. The latest news on the obstruction front, and you should not forget that this is a continuing front, and somebody was tweeting today, I think quite correctly, Mueller, I guess, was passing around a piece titled to this effect, that Mueller's investigation is done, but Trump continues providing evidence, nonetheless, in the form of continuing to attempt to obstruct justice. Let's see. So far, we have heard that the accounting firm that issued purported financial statements on behalf of the Trump organization and Donald Trump himself, which has been subpoenaed by the Oversight Committee, is being instructed not to comply. Don McGahn now is being instructed not to comply. The personnel office, the officer who was in charge of, what's his name? Was it Klein? Who was in charge of security clearances, also being directed not to testify as well. So the battle opening on several fronts, the president, of course, insisting that it will run up, right up to the actual act of impeachment, which he will immediately not appeal to the Supreme Court, but attempt to begin litigation directly in the Supreme Court, which is an awfully difficult thing to do and not something that they're likely to want to take up. But, well, there are situations in which the Supreme Court would have original jurisdiction, and I suppose there's also, I guess, ultimately, were they to rule that they had an original jurisdiction over anything, who could say they were wrong about it? There's no one to whom you could appeal their award of direct original jurisdiction. Even if you could point to objections in the Constitution, they could simply say, that's not what it means. It means something completely different, or at least it means something different today, and won't mean something different, won't similarly mean something different for the rest of you who later might want to do the same thing, but in a way that would damage Republicans. That we can't allow. All right. So let's see. There's the Don McGahn stuff, but I thought maybe we'd hit a couple of other interesting items as well. All right, we did that one. This was an interesting one. Think Progress had a piece of some interest here. Mueller report exposes miners for Trump as a Russian troll effort. Just another one of several stories out there. I guess this one having been revealed in the Mueller report. I don't know whether it was reported elsewhere, but there have been a number of revelations about events that took place in real life, in real world space somewhere, which were organized on Facebook by Russian trolls posing as Americans, American citizens, presumably. And on Facebook, just as on the internet, no one can tell you're a dog. On Facebook, no one can tell you're a Russian, unless, of course, they begin to actually take a look at the provenance of your postings in the metadata and find out what your ISP and location were. Anyway, this is yet another one. And it's a fairly straightforward and dopey-looking one. A photo of a coal miner on one poster for the event was actually a lifelong Democrat who died of black lung disease, just by way of illustrating the absurdity of all this. That's the subheader on Joe Rahm's piece for Think Progress. The poster is displayed below, and it's classic Russian trolling. They've just taken a picture from somewhere. We want to exploit various fractures in the American body politic. Trump says he's pro-coal production, and miners who at least historically were heavily in favor of course, union organizing, and were militant union organizers for a long time because, of course, their profession was extraordinarily dangerous and they were owned by extraordinarily callous management who didn't mind killing them for profit, and they still don't. And so the United Mine Workers were an extraordinarily powerful union and really took a lot of their fate into their own hands in the early days of union organizing, and had outright battles, gun battles, involving lots of death with management and the armed mercenary guards that they hired to break up the unions. It's a very long and storied and very interesting and largely lost history that has a great bearing on this. But of course, now at this point, Trump was out there claiming to be interested in saving miners' jobs. And so that's the fracture point that they thought they could use by organizing miners for Trump. Even though I don't doubt that there were a number of, we've seen them, the miners who are actually out there for Trump, all on their own. But they decided to exploit this fracture and just grab something. So they made the most stereotypical possible picture. And I think it probably grabbed the attention of lots of non-miners too. And I don't know whether it was necessarily designed to do so. But if it wasn't, then it was just a happy accident, because I think probably most people who are miners or have miners in their family would have looked at this picture and said, that is not somebody who currently works in the mines. Not because I recognize everybody who does, but because I think it's a rather ancient looking photo. But it fooled everybody else, and they came out for this Miners for Trump event, and it was Russians the whole time. There were no miners organizing it at all. We'll be right back. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's continue. Look at this Think Progress piece. There's a few details I'd like to extract from this. No pun intended. I guess it's about coal mining. In October 2016, just to put a time frame on it, Pennsylvania social media accounts promoted Miners for Trump. They were rallies, Miners for Trump rallies around the state with a picture of a gritty coal miner. Again, somebody who turns out, A, to have been a lifelong Democrat, and B, to be dead, having died of black lung disease on top of everything else. The rallies coincided with a series of presidential campaign rallies by then candidate Donald Trump. It turns out the social media promotions were not created by U.S. coal miners. However, instead, they were the work of the Internet Research Agency, or IRA, a Russian troll farm, according to Special Counsel Robert Mueller's recently released report on his investigation. And I don't need to tell you the rest of what the investigation is about. You know already. The IRA was the largest of the Russian efforts to help elect Trump to the presidency by manipulating social media. It housed hundreds of professional hackers in one St. Petersburg building, creating thousands of fake posts and comments a day. As the Mueller report explains, the IRA organized U.S.-based rallies from June 2016 until the end of the presidential campaign, often promoting the Trump campaign and opposing the Clinton campaign, and in strange messaging coordination that should not have otherwise occurred and would have been illegal had it occurred, as between the Trump campaign and U.S.-based super PACs. This was non-collusion, non-coordination, according to the report. At least we can't nail that down, happening between the Trump campaign and the intelligence operations of a foreign adversary, which I'm sure is much more on the up and up than illegal coordination with a super PAC here in the United States. Anyway, the full poster for the Miners for Trump rallies reads, "How many Pennsylvania workers lost their jobs due to Obama's destructive policies? Help Mr. Trump fix it." Now, here included is a screenshot, I guess, of the Mueller report that shows the poster and has this description, and there's an interesting redaction in here as well. But the description in the report reads, From June 2016 until the end of the presidential campaign, almost all of the U.S. rallies organized by the IRA focused on the U.S. election, often promoting the Trump campaign and opposing the Clinton campaign. Pro-Trump rallies included 3 in New York, a series of pro-Trump rallies in Florida in August of 2016, and a series of pro-Trump rallies in October of 2016 in Pennsylvania. The Florida rallies drew the attention of the Trump campaign. I would think so. They probably were like, who's organizing this stuff? It's not us. What's happening here? If they're not coordinating outright. Anyway, it drew the attention of the Trump campaign, which posted about the Miami rally on candidate Trump's Facebook account, as discussed below. It goes on then to say, many of the same IRA employees who oversaw the IRA's social media accounts also conducted the day-to-day recruiting for political rallies inside the United States. Things like this Miners for Trump rally. And then the redaction. So we don't know what it says at that point, but it is labeled, as all the redactions are. Why was this redacted? And the answer is harm to ongoing matter. And you should take that both as a sign that it's an ongoing matter, in that remember that a lot of the IRA trolls were in fact indicted by Mueller, though no one expects them ever to be brought to the United States to face the charges and stand trial. So that at least technically makes it an ongoing matter, and gives, in this case, William Barr the opportunity to throw a redaction in there if there's something particularly embarrassing. But it also should be taken another way. Harm to an ongoing matter. This is an ongoing matter. They are still doing this. They do intend to do it in 2020, just as they did in 2016, and no one should forget it. And that's a large part of what has occupied a lot of the news talking heads this morning. A continuation of yesterday's discussions, that what this comes down to is Trump's unwillingness, for whatever reason, whatever strange reason, to combat Russian interference in the next election. Of course, the answer was provided for us yesterday when we reread the discussion caught on tape among the House Republican leadership. The reason they're uninterested in intervening in the Russian intervention is that it benefits Republicans. It gets them elected. They want that more than they want to preserve the independence of the country. It's just true. They don't really care, so long as they get to run it, whether as Vichy Republicans or not. Doesn't matter to them. Anyway, continuing on with the Think Progress story, candidate Trump has been campaigning on a pledge to bring back the coal industry. Why am I reading it? It sounds like this is when they refer to him as candidate Trump. I guess maybe this is the Mueller report explaining itself. Candidate Trump has been campaigning on a pledge to bring back the coal industry, which had been losing jobs for decades due to a combination of steady advances in automation, plus competition from cheap natural gas and renewable energy sources. The Russians ran paid advertising for these rallies on Facebook, featuring repeated images of Trump digs coal signs from real Trump rallies. So they began promoting their fake rallies with photos from the real rallies, which only served to make it look as if they were somehow quasi-official. So if you were a Trump-supporting wacko in whatever neighborhood they were promoting this rally in, you might say, oh, this is a real thing. I might even see Mr. Trump there if I go. Here is a post embedded in this from the infamous Being Patriotic Facebook account. I believe we've read about that one in the past. And, basically promoting the idea and saying, come to a Miners for Trump Unity Day in Pennsylvania rally, complete with scheduling information, etc., etc. While other states, such as Florida, have ended up having Russian-sponsored rallies, there is no evidence that the rally is scheduled in October of 2016 for Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Allentown, Wilkes-Barre, and Erie ever took place, according to the Philadelphia Inquirer. And stands to reason, as you weren't going to draw a whole lot of coal miners to Philadelphia or Erie, and probably not that many to Pittsburgh either. Allentown, of course, originally a steel town, but they're not too far from the anthracite coal mining deposits of old Pennsylvania coal mining operations. Neither is Wilkes-Barre. But the rest of it, I mean, what that is, of course, is an American operative's clue to Russian trolls as to what are the major cities that you would hit in order to draw significant populations inside Pennsylvania. It's not entirely obvious. I mean, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, they may have read about. Allentown, maybe they heard the Billy Joel song. Wilkes-Barre, good luck. Erie, yeah. I mean, you'd need somebody with some understanding of the Pennsylvania media markets to tell you something like that. And though it's not hard to find online, it's more ammunition for the argument that there was some collusion going on, that somebody was giving the Russians targeting information. Anyway, even so, Think Progress continues. The disinformation still had value for the Russians, not just aiding their overall effort to create chaos and division in this country, but also helping create the impression that Trump had more support than he actually did. Trump ended up winning Pennsylvania by a mere 44,000 votes, a margin of under 1%. So even if you don't live in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Allentown, Wilkes-Barre, Erie, etc., and didn't think about going to the event, if you saw that there was supposedly such an event happening, you would say to yourself, I'm not alone here in Pennsylvania, even though the vast majority of his support probably lived elsewhere. It was just too expensive to even try to organize a rally in most of Trump Pennsylvania country. All right, or Pennsylvania Trump country, I guess I should say. Ultimately, more coal power plants closed during Trump's first 2 years in office than President Barack Obama's entire first term. Just wanted to throw some kind of dumb facts into this thing for Think Progress, suggesting that neither Trump nor the Russians were offering more than false hope. That was always obvious. Ironically, the image that the Russians selected for their poster as representative of American coal miners was Lee Hipshire, who died from black lung disease. His son, also a coal miner, told NPR, "My dad was one of the most staunch Democrats that you'll ever see in your life, and he never would have even thought about putting his face on something like that. But who cares? Because one, Republicans who actually are subject to jurisdiction here in the United States and could be sued for copyright infringement or what have you, they don't care about intellectual property or other property rights other than, what I own, my land, my money, my apartment building. They're not a big believer in other kinds of property rights like copyright and intellectual property. But on top of that, of course, the ads were being prepared by Russian internet trolls who are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, and they could care less. Not that that's necessarily different from the way most of the internet works. People steal images on the internet all the time. They shouldn't. It's wrong. They can get yourself in trouble by doing that, but they do it all the time anyway. All right. Let's see. What else was I reminded of? There was something about this story that made me say, oh, yeah, we need to go over to some other story which we had put aside. But now I am having difficulty putting my finger on it. So let's just jump around randomly, shall we? Why not? There are a few other things that needed discussion that perhaps, maybe Joan will want to talk about them when she is on board, but we'll let her drive her own agenda there. Trying to think of what might have come next year, but I think there's a couple of other things that probably, if I dive down here in Pocket, we will find worth bringing up. Here's something of some interest. I mean, this is sort of esoterica, but I thought I'd throw it in there. I keep tweeting about and somehow hinting even on the show at the idea that there's an unusual and sometimes unspoken amount and sometimes unspoken type of coordination going on, it appears, between Trump and Putin and also other dictators around the world. And others have made good points about this. Trump's affinity for international dictators is well known. And I guess maybe if I jump back into Twitter, maybe I was tweeting about it rather than saving it in pocket. But his affinity for Putin and for Kim Jong-un and for Mr. Bonesaw MBS in Saudi Arabia, Duterte in the Philippines, worrying everybody, and rightfully so. But his coordination with Putin in particular, one seems worrisome. Oh yes, I remember. One of the things about the miners for Trump thing is I was thinking about how many years in the old days, since Trump was pining for the old days in his rage tweeting yesterday, in the old days, what would Republicans have made? What would they have thought about the news that a miners' political movement was in fact organized by Russia and not here in the United States? I mean, I'm just sort of thinking about miners and how they originally organized politically for their own protection and in the union movement. And the charge always was, both in miners' unionization and everywhere there was a strong unionization movement going on. Management and Republicans and conservatives in general very frequently would make the charge that this was really communist manipulation, that Russia, that Moscow was directing these people, that there was some international conspiracy and collusion going on between Moscow's then communist government and intelligence services and the obviously communist American traitors who were organizing for things like "Don't kill me at work" and "Could you please pay me in cash instead of company script?" or "I'm dying just by breathing down here. Can we do something about this?" Or "Can we get paid? Can we have days off? Can our kids not have to become minors dropping out of high school?" Those sorts of little creature comforts that those cheating union bastards were always after. You know how that story goes. If you had revealed in the good old days that Russia was in fact the one organizing the miners, it would have been hell to pay. It would have been outrage. Communist bastards, traitors, we should electrocute you. This would have gone on. This would have started immediately and gone on forever, and it still goes on. Anytime anybody wants to unionize, there's this hint that it's somehow vaguely communist, even without a communist Russia to blame it on. I'm just saying I'm old enough to remember that Republicans used to think having Russians organize miners' political movements was a bad thing, and, well, times have changed. So even there, I pine for the old days. But I was also watching people, various commentators, discuss the strange affinity that Trump has for the dictators around the world. And I keep tweeting the idea that somehow he's engaging in this kind of transnational political collusion with the so-called populist nationalists in other countries, and that this idea of transnational political union with other countries, Russia chief among them, is all to own the globalists that they hate so much. I mean, I don't believe that Trump has an interest necessarily in pursuing all that. That feels like Bannon, Miller, and probably some yet unknown weirdos lurking in the White House or Trump orbit that are driving that. But I guess my eye was caught by Jared Yates Sexton's tweet storm on the subject yesterday. A writer who's been published, according to his bio, in places you may have seen, like New York Times and the New Republic. There was a short tweet storm about it, but I guess the tweet that I first saw was the 12th in the series here, and the one I latched onto was where he says, "The story is so large and complex that it gets lost in all these stories, or else the people telling them aren't capable of addressing the whole ball of wax. This is a philosophical takeover of the United States. It could completely undermine our politics and society." I keep talking about the idea of this outright political union between the United States and Russia, which is still far off and still would be considered far-fetched by most people. It's happening only in the strange world of Trump back channels at the moment. There doesn't appear to be any interest in publicly promoting or supporting at this moment actual outright overt political union. It's simply instead, you tell us what to do and we'll do it. And if we're questioned about it, we'll simply say, this is about promoting better relations between our countries. Of course, everyone would understand our relations will be better if we do exactly the same thing all the time, even if that might lead people to question whether or not we've retained our sovereignty here. But I would refer you to this very interesting Jared Yates Sexton thread I'll share with you later. But I thought I'd also just throw in here, I just happened to see this go by, and it's back in the news because of a discovery of some previously lost documents attributed to Winston Churchill during World War II. And it's hearkening back to a very weird and forgotten moment in European history. Now that that's back in the news, Dominic Tierney has this piece that he wrote back in August of 2017. What the prompting was for it then, I'm not certain, but now bringing it back up because of these found documents. When Britain and France almost merged into one country. I just wanted to bring that up in terms of, or in the context of what I've been talking about. It sounds so crazy, and it still is rather far-fetched, I think, to think about political union between the United States and Russia. But remember that this is an actual thing that has happened in the past. I usually use the example of the Pan-Arabic movement and the United Arab Republic that briefly politically united Egypt, Syria, and I think Iraq, and maybe even one or two other smaller states. But I'm not positive about that. I'm not positive about the political history of the UAE, not UAE, but United Arab Republic, UAR. But of course, I mean, another modern parallel, not quite along the same lines. I mean, the European Union is, of course, a political union, but of a slightly different stripe. But this is discussion between Britain and France, which would shock the hell out of most people. And I just thought I'd bring it up just for a historical background, both because it helps explain what I'm talking about and illustrates that it does happen or does enter into contemplation from time to time, even the most even things that would shock you with our modern understanding of the two countries, and it's a real thing, and also it's just esoterica and therefore interesting. On June 16th, 1940, with Nazi Germany on the brink of crushing France, British Prime Minister Winston Churchill and French Undersecretary of Defense Charles de Gaulle, maybe you've heard of him, met for lunch at the Carlton Club in London. There's no stopping lunch for these guys. These two great symbols of patriotism and national independence, as we've come to think of them now, I guess, have made an incredible agreement. Britain and France should be united into a single country called the Franco-British Union. Of course, it's not entirely a new idea. There were kings of both countries back in the day that also thought that they should be united into a single country through conquest, to be sure, or perhaps the unification of the thrones through marriage. But it did never come to fruition. Of course, it was a bad time, and maybe that had something to do with it not coming to fruition this time either. But there wasn't much of France left to give away here anyway. And it was basically, well, we're about to be subsumed by Nazi Germany. Would you like to buy France? I'll sell it to you cheap. Anyway, this was just 2 weeks after British and French troops were rescued from the beaches of Dunkirk. It wasn't a great time for England either, of course, where they had become surrounded by German troops, a story that you may have seen in the film Dunkirk, it mentions, or maybe read about in history. That's another way to find out about it. Although that battle story is fairly well known, the accompanying political drama that almost saw Britain and France merge is now largely forgotten, but the drama of that near fusion can help explain the origins of the European integration and the reasons why Britain ultimately pulled away from the European Union in a decision we know as Brexit. I guess that must have been what prompted this article. The scheme was born of crisis. You heard about it. On May 10th, 1940, Germany had begun a relentless blitzkrieg assault on France, and within a month, French resistance had largely collapsed. Defeatism was rife in France, and a dramatic step was needed to encourage the country to keep fighting from its colonies and to stop the French fleet from falling into Germans' hands. The plan that emerged to unify Britain and France into a single state, just outright, was not entirely new. The idea of integrating the European countries had floated around political circles for a few years, but always seemed fantastical. That would be in the modern sense. Catastrophe was about to turn impossibility into official policy. This discounts all the medieval attempts to unify the two countries. On June 14th, German troops entered Paris. During the next 48 hours, British and French civil service drafted a proposal for a declaration on Franco-British Union. This was no beefed-up wartime alliance or a plan for partial integration similar to today's European Union. The goal was to effectively create one country. The document stated, "At this most fateful moment in the history of the modern world, the governments of the United Kingdom and the French Republic make this declaration of indissoluble union and unyielding resolution in their common defense of justice and freedom against subjection to a system which reduces mankind to a life of robots and slaves." Really. This meant France and Great Britain shall no longer be two nations, but one Franco-British Union. That is pretty remarkable and pretty amazing. No doubt, of course, that Donald Trump thinks that this is the most fateful moment in history of the modern world and might be interested in following suit. At a stroke, hundreds of years of constitutional history would be swept away. Well, that could happen here too. Or the president could have a stroke, and that would undo most of it. There would be joint control of defense, foreign policy, finance, and economic policy. The two parliaments would be united, presumably with French representatives sitting in the House of Commons in London, because France had been conquered, of course. Churchill's private secretary said, "We had before us the bridge to a new world, the first elements of European or even world federation." Look out, globalists are coming. Well, events moved fast. On June 16th, Churchill was personally skeptical but presented the idea to the all-party British cabinet. He was swept along by a wave of enthusiasm. "I was somewhat surprised," wrote Churchill, "to see the staid, solid, experienced politician of all parties engage themselves so passionately in an immense design whose implications and consequences were not in any way thought out." Churchill put his doubts aside and told the cabinet, "In this crisis, we must not let ourselves be accused of lack of imagination." Okay, fair enough there. Charles de Gaulle, who had arrived that morning in London, also had qualms about ending the country of France as he knew it, you think. But de Gaulle embraced the plan as a grand move to change the course of history. The gesture must be immediate. Wow. At 4:30 p.m., de Gaulle telephoned Paul Reynaud, the French prime minister, who had fled the advancing Germans, going from Paris to Tours and then to Bordeaux. Reynaud listened to the proposal for a Franco-British Union with mounting excitement as he scribbled down the details. Here lay possible salvation for France. That's probably what drove most of it, I think. According to one eyewitness, his eyebrows went up so far they became indistinguishable from his neatly brushed hair. What a way of putting it. Reynaud suddenly interrupted de Gaulle. "Does he agree to this? Did Churchill give you this personally?" De Gaulle handed the receiver to Churchill, who assured Reynaud that he approved. Reynaud was transfigured with joy. Boy, whoever was doing the observing here was a flowery writer. It's a good thing they sent the poet there. In London, Churchill boarded a train along with leaders of the major parties, ready for a rendezvous with destiny. I like it. A rendezvous with destiny. Let's see. We'll just finish up this paragraph here and then take our break. I guess the train would travel to the coast, and then the party would sail by ship to meet the French government and sign the Act of Union, although really they could have just invited everybody to London at that point. The train, though, never left the station. I'm into the next paragraph, believe it or not. The scheme collapsed as quickly as it arose. In the days prior to June 16, the French government had become consumed by defeatism as well as anger at Britain for the perceived abandonment at Dunkirk. Over 100,000 French troops had been rescued, but thousands more were left behind on the beach, and I guess that made them mad, along with other things, and how could it not? Anyway, we'll be back after 2 minutes with more. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, with a brand new interruption to say thanks to all of you who support the show. Remember when I told you that our average monthly donation was about $7, for which you were getting 2 great hours of news and entertainment 5 days a week, and how that came out to about 70 cents an hour? That's a pretty good deal, except it's wrong. The math actually works out closer to 17 cents an hour. It is hard to beat a deal like that, and even harder to send your kids to college on it. Thankfully, Patreon.com makes it easy to make that work. Patreon, Patreon.com, is the simple, secure way to make recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Just search for me or the show name on the site, and they make it easy to crowdfund the show so that the power of our numbers can keep the show going for just a few bucks a month. Once again, thanks so much for all your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Shall we continue with this? This is actually very interesting background history, and I suppose if we're interrupted at any point, it's not no skin off my nose. This already happened, and you can read about it in the history books. But this is pretty interesting. Renaud presented the proposal, as it turns out, to the French Council of Ministers, but it was rejected as a British plot to seize the French Empire. They were worried about that even then, I guess. Marshal Pétain, I'm guessing at our Pétain, I'm guessing at our pronunciation, 84 years old and the great hero of World War I. Oops, I've lost my place here. Hi, Joan. How you doing?
Hi, I didn't mean to make
that's
you lose
okay.
your place.
That's all right. That's what happens when you call on Skype. It says, I am now the most important app. Whatever you're reading, get out of here. I'm going to just pop right up over you. But mid-sentence, I was learning about this interesting period in history. A proposed British-French political union in the early days of World War II. Outright union of the two countries, that they would dissolve the two actual sovereign states and merge into one, which I thought was interesting in light of the discussions that I've been bringing up from time to time about, boy, there's an awful lot of weird mirror imagery going on through quote-unquote back channels as between the United States and Russia, almost as if we didn't have a president, but just a messenger. But anyway...
funnily enough,
yes,
the reason I'm late is that I was getting back into what's happening in Kentucky with Russia.
I just seen that.
Yeah.
Tell us what's happening here and through back channels, because we're totally not merging politically with Russia or allowing previously sanctioned sovereign wealth funds and oligarchs to buy critical American infrastructure in the manufacturing sector. So as long as that's not going on, you can tell us what is.
And thereby help Republicans keep power in states like Kentucky.
Weird.
Yeah, this one's really interesting. There were 3 votes in the Senate to allow Donald Trump to lift the sanctions on Rusal. Deripaska's maybe partially owned, ownership's rather fluid in Russian corporate structure.
Yeah, right.
Oleg Deripaska's aluminum company Rusal.
Yes, he currently owns
which
the
is
franchise.
investing $200 million, supposedly, in a Kentucky aluminum plant.
Well,
A plant that Matt Bevins is already the governor of Kentucky. Bevin, not Bevins. I always want to call him Bevins. Anyway, the Bevin has already invested $17 million in Kentucky taxpayer dollars.
Okay, so dollars, not rubles.
Dollars, not rubles this time. It's all fluid.
Yes.
Like Russian business ownership. So anyway, Rand Paul and Mitch McConnell were two of the three votes that let those sanctions get lifted, that sustained the filibuster on lifting or on keeping the sanctions on this company. Make sense?
Yes.
So yeah, Bevan, Paul, McConnell, all making sure that Deripaska, a mobster, really,
No. Yes.
a Russian mobster,
Right.
gets a foothold in their state.
Cool. And then that way he can own the people there as well.
Yeah. And of course, we all remember Deripaska as Paul Manafort's old boss.
Right.
Who was instrumental in helping get Donald Trump elected president.
Yeah.
So, there we go.
So, okay, there's no problem, I think, as I understand it.
Yeah, there's no problem. No problem at all. And it's got to make you wonder again what Mitch McConnell was so invested in the summer and fall of 2016 when he was refusing to allow the Obama administration to tell states and tell the public that Russia was directly interfering in the election.
Yes.
You gotta wonder.
Yeah. Did he have foreknowledge that this would land a deal like that? We don't really know. He may have thought it would just land in his pocket. But this works out better because he can just point to it and say, well, this is job creation, even though, the whole myth of tax cutting or encouraging foreign investment or any really, over-the-top investment, like all of the giant floods of money from outside sources, very rarely end up creating any jobs, or at least on a permanent basis. But anyway, people still buy into that story. But did he know that this was going to happen? I'm not sure. We're not very happy, of course, with the idea.
Was he just keeping all his options open?
Yeah. Which is amazing, given that the administration with which he was fighting was foreclosing options on themselves all the time. Still kind of unbelievable that faced with that kind of resistance by Republicans, the Democratic administration didn't just say, all right, well, I had hoped to go into this with some bipartisan cooperation because it's an attack on America, but I guess you hate America, so we'll just have to tell everybody on our own. But I guess they adjudged that too dangerous, and I don't know.
I guess they did. I guess they just were certain enough that Clinton was going to win anyway.
I guess so. That's the only really good explanation for it. Understandable explanation. I understand it. I disagree, but I understand.
I disagree very strongly, and I see in it a trend, the culmination of a trend from our former Democratic president, who was great in many ways, but who had one big old blind spot.
Yes.
And that was thinking that Republicans were as patriotic and as devoted to our nation as he was.
Well, a lot of people once thought so.
A lot of people once
founding.
You would think that
idea.
8 years of having to deal with them would have disabused him of that notion.
You would have thought so. Maybe I wonder whether he was just like, well, it's me. That'd be almost a very human and understandable reaction to it. They hate me. I beat them, but I'm almost out of here. So somebody else will have better luck with these guys. They're just racist.
It's entirely
and they hate
possible.
Me.
Yeah.
I could understand that as a thought. It's a racist thing. It's a xenophobic thing. They've been attacking me as non-American all this time. The next president will be, at that time they probably thought the next president will be Hillary Clinton, and no one questions her citizenship, and there won't be a racist
Although you would think that the murmurings from John McCain and others that Hillary Clinton was never going to get a Supreme Court confirmation.
Yeah, I mean,
kind of clued him in to where the general sentiment was on the Republican side of things.
Yes, that could have helped. But I wish it had been the culmination of the trend. Unfortunately, I think there are people who carry that banner today.
Yes, I think there are.
Yeah.
And I think some of them might be running for president.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think everybody's running for president, so you're almost certainly correct. Yeah, well, there are a bunch of them, although I guess slowly there's an effort on to differentiate as between the people who believe it that certain sanctions, let's say, deserve discussion and those who don't. That'll make things easier that'll make things easier for early primary voting partisans to make up their mind, but that'll only leave room in the punditry for discussions about how the general electorate is different.
Right.
But okay. So whatever, no collusion, something.
Whatever, no collusion.
So what is happening?
Here's another reason why I would really, really like to see investigations begin in the House. We need to put maximum pressure on Mitch McConnell. We really do. And Mitch McConnell has to come into the discussions of what exactly happened in the 2016 election.
Yeah, that would be a good idea. Honestly, I think that there's still plenty to be looked at among House members as well. I keep reminding everybody and waving around the transcript of the taped conversation between Paul Ryan and Kevin McCarthy and the rest of the Republican leadership in 2017, where they as much as spit out the knowledge that Russia is interfering in our election and in elections around the world. And I mean, even the highlight clip from that everybody remembers is somehow forgotten. The current House Republican leader saying, I think Putin pays Trump. And now he's the biggest cheerleader. Like, I don't know, maybe he believes he'll fall out of an apartment window in Kiev if he doesn't change his tune. I don't know what he'd be doing in Kiev.
The defenestration was mostly a Czech thing.
Oh, okay. Well,
not so much Russia.
Oh, well, there's always open to innovation, I guess.
Russia's a little bit more brutish.
Yeah? Okay.
Yeah, the Czechs were thinking there's a little bit of subtlety to defenestration. It could have been an accident.
Right. Don't buy any Czech windows. Their frames are terrible. We freely admit this.
Yes. Yeah, Russia doesn't even worry about having any question of it being an accident.
Okay. Well, that only makes it more dangerous, I suppose, and leads to things like welcoming Russian investment in your state. So are they buying or just investing in revamping an aluminum plant?
Will be the world's largest aluminum plant if it happens.
All right.
On the side of an old strip mine.
Environmentally sounds good.
I'm sure. Yes.
But, yeah. Man, even the Russians know they don't want that garbage going on in their country. That must be the biggest joke in Russia. Let's put all this damaging crap in America now. We'll create jobs over there or whatever. That'll be the excuse. But for the longest time
we will own them. Yeah.
Russia and China, always throwing environmental concerns to the wind and saying we need this for development. Now, the exciting new development in their countries is we can put all this polluting garbage in the United States for a change. That'll be fun. Aluminum production is pretty toxic, I think, as I understand it. But
as far as I know, it is, yes.
Well, pretty much anything production is toxic, but okay. But it's particularly damaging. And,
but apparently going to be profitable for Kentucky's most prominent politicians.
Oh, well, not directly necessarily. That is, they won't be raking in the profits because of increased sales in aluminum, but because Deripaska unlimited funds will just give them money to allow this thing to happen, I guess. So will it become a Rusal plant, or does it stay locally branded, or I don't even know?
It stays locally branded.
Okay, of course. Good cover. It's nice.
Yes. And it's the Rusal investment is a portion, as far as we know, from what's been made public thus far.
Yeah.
It'll just be partially owned.
Okay. Well, we'll see how this develops.
It's the $200 million apparently that they feel they need to really kick this thing off and get it going.
Terrific.
In time for Bevin and McConnell to be reelected in 2020.
All right. Well, we'll see if it works. I have a brand name suggestion for them if they want to change. Aluminum One. Do you think that would be good? I don't know if that would remind anybody of any, bring up any bad memories or anything, but I don't know, selling key infrastructure assets and manufacturing assets to Russians and giving them possible control. I'm sure they're only making a small investment, but, I guess if any of these guys find themselves, or if the other partners in the investment find themselves dissatisfied with what the Russians are extracting, I guess if any of them find themselves brutally murdered, they'll change their minds about how much of the profit mobster Deripaska is entitled to. Although he may be under instructions to be on his best behavior here in the United States to open the doors for more such investments. But as you know, the mob makes a great and stable partner for legitimate businesses.
Yes. Like the Trump Organization?
Yes. Right, like them. They're doing great. They're a lot less violent, but they happen to have a very unique industry where exchanging large bags of cash is actually something that people, for whatever reason, see happen all the time because they're in money laundering. But the excuse is, people buying luxury apartments. The kind of people who do that can pay cash for them and frequently do, and we don't ask where the cash came from. Not usually the case with aluminum plants, but... Not
usually the case, no.
We'll see.
I'm curious as to... this is, as far as I know, the first major Russian investment in a sort of infrastructure kind of thing in the U.S.
It may be. I don't know for sure.
I haven't really looked into it before because it hasn't come up before, but I'd be really interested to know where exactly, if Russia has invested elsewhere in the States.
Yeah. I mean, there was always the rumor, like with, say, Uranium One. The idea was, this is another great irony of all of this, or maybe it's done by design or whatever, but the accusation was always that Clinton, as Secretary of State, was one actor in a large pool of federal officials who would have been given the opportunity to review, for national security reasons, that kind of investment. We don't easily sell major infrastructure that has national security or even tangential national security implications to Russia, because we have the history. We wouldn't be. China wanted to buy it, be a problem. Russia wanted to buy it, be a problem. Other countries, perhaps not so much, but even then, we would do due diligence to make sure that there wasn't outside investment in a French bid, say, for the aluminum plant, for these reasons. And of course, Hillary Clinton, well, for one thing, didn't play any particular role in the Uranium One thing, but the story was told the opposite way. And, I guess you can see, for instance, why it would have made sense for Russians and Russian oligarchs who wanted to do this to oppose the presidency of Hillary Clinton. This bringing in a Republican would likely, I'm sure, from their understanding of American politics, they would have understood this to mean an open for business policy in general. But if it was a Cold Warrior type, like McCain or someone of that sort, it might not work. But a different or newer Republican, and certainly one that was personally corrupt and easily bribable, would have been fantastic. They probably just didn't know they had that opportunity until about 2015 to make that happen.
Bribable or blackmailable.
Yeah, well, either way.
Because there's still that possibility out there.
They always probably, it's interesting, they probably always thought about that. You know, that was always a worry for American intelligence and counterintelligence operatives. Look out for Russians being able to get compromising material to blackmail American officials. And they probably didn't think that much about what about a president who would just sell America because he could get rich doing it. That probably didn't occupy a lot of their time.
Who could have imagined it would be so simple?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure it was contemplated at some point, but they said, well, why would such an idiot be elected? And now we know.
Now we know.
Okay. Well, that's probably bad, but probably one of the slower moving disasters, though it does reveal a lot about Mitch McConnell and ought to become an issue for him. And I'm sure, you know, McConnell's thinking I would welcome it because I'll barnstorm the state talking about how I brought in investment and new jobs.
Right. It needs to be a larger story than a Kentucky story, though. It really does. Yeah. It needs to be a national story, and it needs to be part and partial of the censure impeachment investigation story.
Yes, that's true. That's a good
because
point.
of the role the Senate plays in impeachment.
Yes, right. And if they're going to oppose it reflexively on party lines, a decapitation strike against the party leadership might not be a bad idea.
Exactly.
Hey, that's a good idea. Good idea, Joan. You should go do that. Yeah,
let's make that happen.
All right. I mean,
because we can do that, right?
Right. And I don't think our consultants or operatives at that level have a political objection that they can formulate to undermining the integrity of Mitch McConnell as he faces election in Kentucky. Why would you oppose that?
I have no idea why.
I've given time; they'll come up with something. But yeah. All right. I mean, God help us.
I just remain kind of gobsmacked at how little attention Mitch McConnell gets as a truly disruptive and damaging figure in the nation.
Yeah, he just looks like nothing's going on. You know, he's a boring-looking guy. He sounds boring.
He's an institutionalist. He reveres the Senate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sure. Taking a wrecking ball to it, but in an institutionalist kind of way. Yeah,
I think we've finally gotten to the point of realizing as a nation, and even in the punditry, that this is not normal in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
It hasn't trickled down to this is not normal in the Senate.
No, not to date. Well, all right. I mean, it's on my wish list. It's on yours, and you'll be, actually like working to try and set that narrative. We'll just have to see whether it takes hold outside of our circles. I certainly hope so.
I hope so.
Because that really was
damaging. Kentucky aluminum plant might be our wedge to do that. We'll see.
Okay, we'll continue looking for more.
I mean, Kentucky's talking about it.
Yeah.
The basis of the story I just wrote was an op-ed, or a column rather, an editorial column in the Kentucky Courier-Journal.
Yeah.
So they're looking at it. Some folks back home is just, we're going to need a credible, intelligent Kentucky Democrat to take on McConnell to be talking about it.
Okay. That's not always easy to find.
No.
Okay. But, all right, well, we'll be on a lookout, see how this, how things develop there. I mean, yeah, I got to admit, I'm not up to speed on the state of the race, which is a sad thing.
Thus far I don't think that we've seen somebody really, really good stick their neck out. And it's a problem. It's a problem in a lot of red states. Idaho certainly has this. We do not have a bench of solid Democratic possibilities. And I don't know how many there are in Kentucky. We'll have to get the elections crew on that one.
Okay. Well, we know where they are. We'll go call them up. Okay. What else is on the horizon here?
Well, speaking of Russia, I just want to highlight the one little thing. Even Kirsten Nielsen, the woman who was okay with putting babies in cages, was worried about Russia interference in our elections.
Yes.
Did you see that one?
I did. I saw, that took a lot of time up in the punditry this morning, and with good reason. I guess the focus that I saw was she was very worried about possible interference, and that Mick Mulvaney said, don't talk to the president about it. He doesn't like hearing about it. So they just said, defend all Constitution against all enemies that we feel like defending it against. Not this one.
Right. But that even Nielsen said, hey, this is kind of a problem. We should probably secure our system against against interference again in 2020. And
yes.
Mulvaney's like, nah.
Nah, maybe not. Which, same thing, I guess, like you were saying, this needs to be highlighted about McConnell doing this. These guys don't opt not to take care of this business if they have any inkling that it will go other than in their favor.
Right.
They must have some strange reason, with all these crazy back channels being established, to know that allowing Russia to interfere in our elections is good for Republicans, and so therefore we'll do nothing. If there was any doubt, they'd be all over it. I mean, there's unending energy for making sure that Democrats and people who trend Democratic can't vote, even if the reason is crazy. But for some reason, fighting for the ability of Russia to influence our elections is weirdly on their agenda. So they must know something.
Because they know they have to cheat to win.
Yeah.
And if it's cheating with Russia, that's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I don't know if we'll ever find out. Will Russia ever say, what would be funny is if we just totally cheated in the other direction just to screw with them. I don't know whether they ever have any idea about doing something like that. I don't see why they would think it was in their interest, unless they just loved disrupting the country and thought it was funny to change presidents every 4 years for whatever reason.
It may have started that way.
Yeah.
They may have gone into this as sort of a lark. Let's just see what we can do. And I think that they're having a fun time making a fool out of Trump.
Yeah, I think they're enjoying that. The Russian TV suggests that that's the case.
But at the same time, I think they're recognizing that it doesn't hurt them economically.
Yeah. Maybe we can make some money.
I don't know. Maybe they'll feel like they have Mitch McConnell and they have the Senate. So, they can turn on Trump and get somebody else in 2020.
Yeah, it could
I
be.
don't know.
I have no idea. But, all right, well, we'll follow up and watch what happens in Kentucky and see if any other similar investment schemes break through. I wouldn't be surprised. I would think they would think this is something of a gold rush, and that if they can get sanctions lifted once, they can do it again and again, and dive in and just buy up whatever assets they think they might like to take. I guess if they ever buy the Yankees, that'll be like that'll be the thing that finally wakes up America. Except, there's plenty of Yankee haters out there, but that seems to be the gold standard franchise.
You think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It might be the thing that changes direction. I don't know. Would San Francisco Giants do it? I got no idea.
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Well,
might have to be football.
Yeah. Oh, true. So who would they buy? Dallas Cowboys would be the obvious answer, I think. America's team. It's
no,
Russia's
Patriots.
team. Oh, perfect. Oh, and I think they know a guy who knows a guy.
I think they know a guy
who might need cash sometime soon, like really fast. Wouldn't that be something? How about that for a spy novel? They asked the massage parlor. They set the Chinese to the task.
Oh, Lord.
International coordination. Oh, wow. All right. Well, I got a book proposal to go write. I need your help in this. We can adapt it to a movie. Okay. Thanks, Joan. That's the inspiration I needed. I gotta go.
All right.
Thanks for coming by. Okay, we'll talk to you again next week, and hand the microphone over for the time being to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. This little musical interlude tells you that I have run out of time to tell you what is on his program, except for what I can squeeze in the next few seconds after this.
From Daily Kos Radio on networksradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
How about I share the science bit at the end of his blurb? The NASA probe InSight detected a Mars quake, marking the first time a seismological trembler has been recorded on another planet. That's the sort of material that you can always get on the second half of the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy after the news, coming up next.